guys, welcome to the Blackhawks Breakaway Podcast presented by Toyota. Toyota has more all-wheel drive and four-wheel drive vehicles than any other brand. Find yours and shine on. Toyota, let's go places. I am riding solo today. Pat is on a well-deserved vacation, as are many of the Chicago Blackhawks that have gotten away during this Four Nations break. But we decided to bank out one more podcast before we officially shut it down until the Blackhawks return to their break from their break next week. Before we get into a little Four Nations preview, let's kind of figure out where the Blackhawks left off prior to going into the break. And I think there have been some positives over the last few games for the Blackhawks specifically. I know early in the season, the first few months, the Hawks were really struggling to pick up points. I know getting consecutive wins has been an issue for the Chicago Blackhawks over the last 2 years. But for the Blackhawks going into the break, there were quite a few games that the Hawks found ways to get it to overtime, get it to a shootout. I think the Hawks had picked up points in 8 of their last 11 games going into the break. So from that perspective, I think it's a positive. Now, there are some games that you feel kind of got away from Chicago where they had leads against Edmonton. They had a lead against St. Louis. Unfortunately, lose in a 10-round shootout. I think if you ask the Blackhawks, that win or a potential win over the St. Louis Blues would have really propelled this team into maybe a good psychological place, because they had just been coming off a really impressive 6-2 win over the Nashville Predators at home. And so it would have been nice for the Blackhawks to capitalize in St. Louis to go into this break with some positive momentum. Not that the Hawks were going to come back from this break feeling like they were going to be making a playoff push, but at least it would be more fun for guys going into the break that they finished on a positive note, and they can return from the break on the other side with some sort of positivity, because there's going to be a lot of uncertainty between now and March 7th, the trade deadline specifically, because specifically I can think of a guy like Ryan Donato, who's been on an absolute heater for Chicago with 8 points in his last 4 games going into the break. He's on pace for 60 points as a guy that's really more of a bottom 6 player. So there were some positives going into this break. And so it's going to be interesting to see how the Blackhawks come out of it. And like I was listening to, I think it was Elliotte Friedman on 32 Thoughts on Monday, had said that there are a lot of teams where players kind of said their quote unquote goodbyes to their teammates because they weren't sure if they were going to be coming out of this break as a member of the current team that they are on, because there might be some movement during this Four Nations break. There isn't this, it's not like the Christmas break where the NHL goes into a holiday freeze and there are no transactional moves or whatever. Like, I think a lot of GMs are staying in town because they realize that these next few weeks are going to be crucial as far as potential player movement goes, and how this Four Nations tournament might impact things. Like we had mentioned the Mikko Rantanen trade and the Taylor Hall trade that Chicago was a part of, getting that done before the tournament, because there could be potential injuries in this tournament that might kind of reshape some of the needs for these playoff and Stanley Cup contenders. I think of years ago when John Tavares of the New York Islanders at the time, their captain, got hurt during the Olympics and he suffered a season-ending injury, and it totally changed the complexion of what the Islanders wanted to do going into the trade deadline. So that's where things stand right now for the Blackhawks. I liked what I was seeing going into the break. Obviously, there were some frustration parts where the Hawks, they get a point in St. Louis, probably could have had another one. I thought the Hawks played very well against Edmonton. Edmonton gets it into overtime, or the Hawks find a way to force overtime after being down 3-1. Then they can't figure out to get that second point. So there were some positives for the Blackhawks going into the break. And speaking of, let's get to the Four Nations. The lone representative for the Blackhawks in this tournament is Teuvo Teravainen, who's going to be representing Team Finland. Now, I hope Teravainen is mostly healthy, because he had been taking a few maintenance days leading up to this international tournament. So I know it probably means a lot to him. It's going to be interesting to watch this tournament from his perspective, because I think it's Canada, it's USA. They're kind of the 1-2 favorites in this tournament. And then it's Sweden, and then Finland's kind of like a long shot in this tournament. But it'll be fun for Blackhawks fans to at least get to watch Teuvo Teravainen in this tournament. Hopefully Chicago will soon get to a point where they are sending half their roster, because I think about the old days with Patrick Kane and Jonathan Toews and Marian Hossa and Duncan Keith and Brent Seabrook and Patrick Sharp and Nicholas Hjalmarsson, like all these players that were representing different countries. And it was like 10 players from the dynasty era that were participating in these international tournaments, which was really special as a Blackhawks fan to watch, because you had a lot of investment in those players. But it is going to be interesting to also watch it from a different perspective of seeing some teammates go head to head, like Matthew Tkachuk versus Alexander Barkov, or Austin Matthews versus Mitch Marner. And like, what is this tournament going to look like? So a quick kind of refresher of this. So 4 teams: Canada, USA, Sweden, Finland. Those are the four nation teams that are participating in this tournament. And there really is no ramp up period. There are no exhibition games. There are no kind of preliminary games that go right into the round robin. It is straight on. They got 2 practices in, and then Wednesday this tournament is going to kick off, and it's going to be each team playing each other once. And the rules are 3 points for a win in regulation, 2 points for a win in overtime or a shootout, 1 point for a loss in overtime and a shootout, and 0 points for a regulation loss. So a lot is on the line. And when teams were putting together their rosters, like Team USA, Canada, Sweden, Finland, a lot of these teams were trying to figure out, okay, we might have to bring, for example, like Tampa Bay brought Braden Point, Anthony Cirelli, and Brandon Hagel. It's like those are 3 of Tampa Bay's forwards. And obviously it helps that John Cooper is the head coach, but you kind of need that instant synergy to perform well in a tournament like this, where there is really no runway. And so really excited to see how this is going to shake out. I think I was hearing a lot of talk about what the energy of this tournament is going to be. Is it going to be more of like an all-star game feel, because we have never really seen a tournament like this and there isn't any history to lean on, where it's the Olympics, the aura of that, the World Cup in the past has brought out the best in some of these international tournaments. But with the Four Nations tournament, this is the first time we're ever experiencing a tournament like this. Here's my thing. The NHL and the 𝗵𝗹 specifically, the Players Association, they have really been pushing for international play for a very long time. And this is basically the best on best tournament when it comes to countries since 2016, since I think the World Cup. And so I would be shocked if this didn't have a lot of intensity going into it, especially being in Montreal and Boston, where you're going to get the Canadians booing the USAs. We all know what's been going on with booing the national anthem. So I feel like that might add another layer of some of these international tournaments. And then you're going to have USA going into Montreal, and you're going to feel the energy from the Canadian perspective. So it's going to be a fascinating tournament. I think because the players care so much about these international tournaments, we're going to see an intense tournament. And I admittedly said it on the last podcast, I wasn't feeling the hype of this tournament leading into it. But on Monday, when all the teams reported to their respective cities and were participating in these practices, I mean, you're seeing some of the line combinations that are getting tweeted out. I'm like rubbing my hands together like, man, I can't wait to see what this is going to look like. So let's start with, I'll go with the favorite, and then we'll kind of like drop, I'll preview each team, like Canada, USA, Sweden, then Finland. And Canada and USA, they're actually they're very close. Like, it is splitting hairs when it comes to, if you look at some of the betting odds. And I think part of that has to do with the injury to Quinn Hughes for Team USA. I think Team USA the strength of Team USA's roster is on the back end and in goal, right? So you look at if there was a healthy Quinn Hughes, it would have been Quinn Hughes and Adam Fox as your 1 and 2 power play quarterbacks are probably driving your first line. Zach Werenski, Jacob Slavin, Charlie McAvoy, Noah Hannafin, Brock Faber. I mean, their defensive core is absolutely loaded. And then you look at Team USA's, you look at their goaltenders in Jake Ottinger and Connor Hellebuyck. I mean, it's basically like a coin toss. I imagine Connor Hellebuyck is going to get the start for Team USA because he's got, I think, 6 shutouts this season for the Winnipeg Jets. He's performing at an unbelievable level. And so I think you ride that hot hand. But if for whatever reason Hellebuyck gets hurt or doesn't perform well in game 1 and Team USA is in a pickle, they can easily go to Jake Ottinger and feel like they're going to be getting the same goaltending as they would have if either of the other ones started. And so the big storyline for me with Team USA outside of the Quinn Hughes injury is how healthy is Auston Matthews? Because every time we talk about Canada versus USA, the finally seeing both teams at the height of their power, or close to the height of their power, the strength of Team USA now is down the middle with, Jack Eichel and Auston Matthews and Dylan Larkin. I was going to throw in there, but I think he's going to be playing wing now. And it looks like JT Miller and Vinny Trocheck are going to be kind of manning the 1 and 2 on the 3rd and 4th line. So Team USA has a respectable center group, big. But with Auston Matthews, he's been dealing with this mysterious injury pretty much all season where he missed a good chunk of games in the first half of the season, returned, I think, for a couple weeks, then was out again. And so fortunately, it hasn't really been a talking point leading into this tournament as far as Matthews not looking 100%, because I was watching some Maple Leafs games just leading into the tournament. And I'm like, he's playing his normal minutes. He's producing his normal rate. Their power play as a whole has struggled in Toronto this year, oddly enough, because of the star power that they have. But if Auston Matthews is close to 100%, this is going to be a really interesting tournament because it's a total game changer from what USA has had in the past as far as the center depth goes. And so really looking forward to seeing how Team USA can match up against Team Canada. The other fun storyline to watch in this, unfortunately, we're not going to be able to see Quinn Hughes and Jack Hughes play together because of Quinn's injury, but the 𝗵𝗪 brothers are going to be on a team together with Matthew and Brady. I imagine both of those players are going to be playing on separate lines because they bring the same kind of element. And I think maybe it would be cool to see them take a couple shifts together. Like if it's after a penalty kill or whatever, you kind of like load up an energy line. But I think that's going to be cool where Matthew 𝗵𝗪 brought that element, that physicality element to the Florida Panthers when he got traded from Calgary to Florida and kind of elevated that group into Stanley Cup contention. It's going to be interesting to see if they can do the same for Team USA in these international tournaments. And we know that Team USA, their number one rival in this tournament is going to be Team Canada. And I think let's start on in goal for Team Canada, because that's the biggest storyline. Who's going to start? Is it going to be Jordan Binnington? Is it going to be Adin Hill? Gotta be honest with you, I'm a little surprised that Logan Thompson didn't get consideration for this tournament and to potentially start, because he's been excellent for the Washington Capitals. But at practice today on Tuesday, as we're recording this, John Cooper, Team Canada's head coach, named Jordan Binnington as the starter for Team Canada against Team Sweden on Wednesday. So a little surprised by that. I thought it would be Adin Hill, considering he has the most recent Stanley Cup of the two goaltenders, and Jordan Binnington's body of work has not been the best over the last few years. It feels like Adin Hill, when Adin Hill is hot, like he's a goaltender that you want to ride. But we'll see if Team Canada decides, if they don't like the performance in game one, do they change it up really quick and go to their other goaltender? Or in a tournament like this, do you need your goaltender to get a feel for the games and not have, like, I don't know if you would want to throw in a backup goaltender, like in the third game of the tournament in a must-win situation where there is no bronze medal game, by the way, in this. It's a round robin for the 4 teams, and then it's championship game on February 20th. So it really is kind of all on the line. On defense, man, I look at the Devon Toews and 𝗟𝗶𝗹 pairing. That's obviously Team Canada's strength. But without 𝗦cie𝗰𝗶𝗹, Drew Doughty steps in. So he's going to be on that third pairing with 𝗭cie Theodore, unless they decide to roll with someone else as the sixth defenseman, and Doughty is that extra. Josh Morrissey and Colton Parayko are the second pairing. But let's get to the forwards, because I was watching the lines get tweeted out on Monday from Team Canada's practice, and I had my hand over my mouth as to like how loaded they actually are. And the big storyline for Team Canada going into this tournament was whether their captain Sidney Crosby would be healthy enough to participate, because he had missed the last two Penguins games leading into the tournament with an upper body injury that he suffered in I think it was like the third game, but it looked scary. He left the game, didn't look great. Then he returned, finished the game, also participated in the shootout, but then the next day didn't participate in practice, and he was ruled out for the next two games. But Crosby made the trip to Montreal. He practiced on Monday, practiced on Tuesday. He spoke to the media and said, good to go. And there were some rumors that he might miss Wednesday's game, since they don't play again until Saturday. So maybe they give him they let him sit Wednesday's game, have a few extra days for rest, and then really prep hard to participate in the final two games. But because of the shortness of this tournament, if Team Canada loses in game one to Team Sweden, there is no runway. That if you pick up 0 points in a tournament like that, it could be the difference between advancing to the championship game or not. And so Crosby he already has come out publicly and said, I'm good to go. So he's going to participate for Team Canada as soon as Wednesday's game. And the lines were this for Team Canada. It was Sam Reinhart, Connor McDavid, Mitch Marner as the first line, Mark Stone, Sidney Crosby, Nathan MacKinnon as the second. So you got the Nova Scotia line, Brad Marchand, Braden Point, Seth Jarvis as the third. And then you have Brandon Hagel, Anthony Cirelli, and Sam Bennett. But here's the thing that my jaw dropped when I saw this. When they tweeted out the power play unit of Team Canada, their first power play unit is Connor McDavid, Sidney Crosby, Nathan MacKinnon, Sam Reinhart in the bumper, who is like the best in the NHL at that position, and 𝗟𝗻𝗋, quarterback in the power play. I mean, good luck to penalty killers if you're Team USA, Team Sweden, or Team Finland, because that is as lethal of a power play unit on paper as we've seen maybe ever in an international tournament. Like, that's how loaded these are. Like, maybe, I mean, 3-4 of the top like 15 players ever, when it's all said and done, like, might be these guys right here. And so just a remarkable unit on paper for Team Canada. And that's their strength. Like, their forward group is their strength. They're going to come at you in waves, and it's going to put pressure. This is why the Team USA versus Team Canada is going to be extremely interesting, because it's like Team USA's strength is defense, goaltending. Team Canada's is all forwards. So, and obviously their top pairing on defense in Makar and Toews, like, they drive offense the same way that they do in Colorado. So that'll be interesting. But it's like, who's going to negate who? Like, which the strength of which team is going to prevail in this tournament? It's going to be fascinating to watch. And then with Team Sweden, looking at them, I'm trying to see like where exactly their strength is. I don't think they have one specific strength. I just think they're an all-around solid team from top to bottom. Like, they don't have the strongest forward group. They don't have the strongest defense group. I actually think their defensive group is pretty underrated, with Victor Hedman, Mattias Ekholm, and then the third pairing, I guess, is Gustav Forsling and Rasmus Dahlin. I mean, that's a pretty good third pairing if you're looking at it. And then they have two pretty dependable goaltenders in Philip Gustafsson and Linus Ullmark. So Team Sweden's kind of in these international tournaments, Team Sweden does well because they just gel together. There aren't any super, like, total superstars on that team where every tournament you're like, oh, you have to be aware of this guy. Similar to Team Canada, when it's like, you got to know when Connor McDavid's on the ice, when Nathan MacKinnon's on the ice, or with Team USA, you have to beware when Austin Matthews is on the ice, right? For Team Sweden, there's no one really up front that you have to beware of. It's just their line combinations, their 3-man unit, all 4 lines are really dependable. Like for some reason, they always click in these tournaments fairly quickly. Like 𝗵𝗹 𝗟𝗶 𝗟𝗔 and 𝗵𝗛 𝗃𝗀 is their first line. Like I don't know if teams are going into this tournament, like if you're Team Canada or Team USA and you're like, oh boy, we have to beware of 𝗵𝗹 𝗟𝗔 or 𝗵𝗹 𝗟𝗏. It's more so like you have to beware of that entire line, because together they can be really strong. And on the back end, obviously Victor Hedman is the guy that you have to watch for, but you don't really game plan around the primary defenseman. You just try to shut down the other team's top line. And then you have to beware of the mobile defensemen that are on the ice. And so I'm really excited to watch this tournament. The one bummer about it is obviously Team Russia is not participating in this tournament for a variety of reasons. But just looking at what Team Russia's roster would have been, like Kirill Kaprizov, Evgeny Malkin, Nikita Kucherov would probably be the first line. Panarin, Pavel Buchnevich, like Andrei Svechnikov might be the third. Alex Ovechkin and Matvei Michkov and Val Nichushkin, like those guys would be the third line probably. So, and then in net, they would easily have the best goaltending trio in Andrei Vasilevsky, Igor Shesterkin, and 𝗵𝗹 𝗟𝗏. Like that is just an absolutely loaded goaltending group. And so it's a bummer that they won't be part of this, because it feels like if Team Russia was in this tournament, they would be right there with Team USA and Team Canada as far as being a favorite goes. But hopefully, I know the Olympics are happening next year. Like hopefully we'll see if I actually haven't even followed that. I don't even know if they're eligible to even participate in those, but it'll be cool to see like a true best on best. And then we also don't get guys like Leon Draisaitl, who's from Team Germany, and he's one of the best players in the entire world, top 3 player in the NHL right now. And so, but yeah, again, admittedly, wasn't overly hyped about this tournament, like the build up to it. But I knew that once we saw the practice lines, the game starting, I'm going to be pretty invested in it, because I'm going to be curious to see what the intensity level is going to be like and which country prevails and how that might set the tone for the upcoming Olympics, because it's the first opportunity for guys like Connor McDavid and Austin Matthews to represent their countries on a large scale. Like McDavid is like probably going to go down as like top 2 best players of all time in NHL history. And he's never represented Team Canada outside of a World Juniors, So I'm really curious to see how this is going to go, because the last time McDavid and Austin Matthews participated in the World Cup in 2016, they were part of the North America team, where it was like the under 23 team that would like everyone rallied behind. And it was a little weird, because it was like, well, I don't know if that tournament was indicative of Team USA and Team Canada's strength, because it took away a lot of the players that would have been on that team or would have been at least knocking on the door to be like a 12th forward. Like Austin Matthews started that tournament for Team North America as the 13th forward, and then he ends up on the top line like as the tournament was going on, because he hadn't even been drafted yet. Like he was the draft eligible player. So really excited to see this tournament. I know it's a bummer that the Blackhawks only have one representative in Teravainen, but I think in the future, as the Hawks start to reload their pipeline and the prospects in the system start to graduate to the pro level, and then they become full-time NHL players, and then they're making impacts with the Blackhawks, then you're going to start to see the Hawks, their representatives start to grow. And the most notable one, obviously, is Connor Bedard, who I'm sure he's disappointed that he didn't get consideration for this tournament, or that he wasn't even part of, the 13th forward or whatever. But I think he understands it, that at the time the team was picked, he just wasn't really part of the conversation, because the Blackhawks were struggling as a whole. At that time, Bedard had gone on it was like the beginning of the year was like a 12-game goal drought. So he wasn't really lighting it up in the score sheet. And so no surprise that he's not on the team. But I bet you he's going to be extremely motivated to participate in the Olympics next year and play his way into the conversation, because we saw last year when the season ended, he went over right away to the World Championships overseas to participate in the tournament with Team Canada. Unfortunately, that didn't go his way either, because he ended up finding himself as kind of like the 13th forward on some instances or in some games. But Bedard is likely going to be a face of Team Canada for many years to come. But he's still very young, and so I would preach patience while the Blackhawks and Bedard try to navigate his way through the NHL. And once the team surrounds Connor with a stronger supporting cast, you're going to see him become more the player that we all expect him to be, because he's not going to feel this need to have to do it all. Because right now it feels like you watch a lot of Blackhawks games and you're like, he's trying everything. He's trying to carry the entire offense on his own. And you expect that you expect his how he cares so much because he wants to produce. But once the Hawks surround him with a stronger supporting cast, then you're going to see some of the numbers start to inflate. He'll start to be paired with some finishers. The power play will pop, and he will benefit from that. And so no concerns there, but excited to see when Bedard is participating for Team Canada, because that'll be a fun thing for Chicago, similar to how it was exciting for Blackhawks fans to watch Jonathan Toews and Duncan Keith and Patrick Kane for Team USA. So excited to see this tournament. It's going to kick off on Wednesday. Team Canada is facing off Sweden. And then the championship game is at 7 p.m. Central Time on ESPN on Thursday, February 20th. The Blackhawks are going to be returned to practice next Tuesday. So I think it's going to be Tuesday, Wednesday, they're going to practice. I think Thursday they'll be off. Then Friday they return to practice. And then the next game isn't until Saturday. So the Hawks have a mini training camp next week when they do return. Obviously, Teravainen is still going to be at the tournament in Montreal and in Boston. So he won't rejoin the team until after the tournament ends, probably on that Friday. And even so, he might even get a rest day on that Friday and join the team in Columbus. But it's a much needed break for the Blackhawks. I think psychologically it's been a tough year. And so hopefully they come back rejuvenated and ready to finish off the final 2 months of the season. And it's going to be interesting because March 7th trade deadline is going to be right around the corner when the Blackhawks do return to game action on February 22nd against Columbus. Like there's a couple weeks after that where they're going to have some decisions to make on some pending UFAs and which players they're going to move, which players they might look to add. Maybe a player shakes loose where the Hawks try to take a flyer on a guy that could be a potential piece moving forward. But so we wanted to squeeze in one more podcast before we kind of shut things down for the rest of the week. So we'll take the rest of this week off. We'll reconvene next week when Pat comes back and try to put a bow on the Four Nations tournament, but also kind of look ahead to the final 2 months of the season. And I'm sure we will talk a lot about the trade deadline for the Blackhawks leading into it. So that's going to do it for this edition of the Blackhawks Breakaway Podcast presented by Toyota. I'm 𝗵cie𝗰𝗶 𝗟𝗀. We will talk to you next week.